So, right. It's African Youth Leader Conference. All right. Good morning. I believe you can hear me, yeah, right? Okay, I think we can chat. So if you can hear me, please say something. Say you
Yeah,
can hear
hi.
me.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
You can hear me. All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. It is about that time. Apologies for starting late, but of course, we are here now and we start about now. So just in case you're just joining, please kindly go to your social media accounts. Just quickly make a post that the program has started so that people can join in as well. Send a text message or something to someone out there that you know needs this opportunity. Please go ahead, send it quickly in another 1 minute. Let's go ahead to our social media accounts: WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. Let's flood all the pages with the flyer for the program and just to enable people to join actually. So let's try and do that in another 1 minute. We're starting about now. We're starting now. Let's go and post it everywhere. Let people know what's happening because this is a conference that you should not miss and you shouldn't allow your friends to miss. So please try as much as possible to send it out quickly. I'm giving us 1 minute to do so. So I have like 30 seconds left. Let's post it everywhere. All right. I believe we've done that. I believe we've done that. All right. All right, beautiful people, welcome again to another exciting time at the West African Young Leaders Conference. And I'm super excited about this conference because there is a whole lot packed up for every single person that's participating. We have amazing speakers from all over Africa. And trust me when I say that this is definitely going to be impactful. So please get your papers, get your books, get your jotters, get your pen, put your mind to it. Trust me, it's going to be an amazing ride. And of course, I'm your wonderful host, Itunuoluwa Ruth Da Silva, and I'm not going to be doing this alone. I have my beautiful co-host. She's somewhere around here. She's going to turn on our camera so we can see her beautiful face. I'm talking about the person of Oyinda Mola. Yeah, that's Oyinda Mola right there. Hello, Oyinda Mola. Nice to see you. How you doing? Oh, you have to unmute. We can't hear you. Unmute, please.
Oh, sorry about
Oh,
that.
hi,
Hi.
Oida. How you
Hi.
doing?
I'm very
Good
well, thank you.
morning.
How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited. Are you excited too?
Oh, yes, I am.
Yeah. Finally, the long-awaited conference is finally here. So
Oh
I'm
yes.
super excited about. What are your expectations today?
Oh, I really, really want to get impacted from different
Expectations?
leaders. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I mean, it's a whole lot packed. It's packaged, like packed, and my expectations are to to become a better version.
Yeah, awesome, amazing, amazing. And I'm sure our speakers too are super filled to pour out knowledge to us. And even our listeners too, I believe that they are ready to hear from us. All
Yeah.
right, so just in case you're just joining, come again, East African Youth Leadership Conference. And of course, my name is Itunu Oluwa, your host, and Oyedamola is the co-host for today. And let's not forget the convener, Mr. Yemo, the convener of this program. If it was possible for us to give a round of applause, I think we would have done that. So, but I don't know if that. Let me just clap from here. All right. Just in case, I don't know. Linda is still clapping, of course. We have to clap very well because it's such an amazing event just to gather youth all over Africa, just for you to make impact, just for you to pour out knowledge, just for you to help one another. This is absolutely an amazing adventure. And trust me, I would definitely not want to miss any other conference coming after this one. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, we're going to jump right into today. You have something to say, Oyinda?
No, no. I said same here. Same here.
Yeah, actually. All right, then. We're going to go straight into the for the day. Then, just before our speaker, I'm going to call up groups of the speakers that we have. And that we're having during the conference, we missed it. Just to that, John Jokomas is actually a dedicated advocate of leadership, is a seasoned academic executive leadership coach and trainer based in the UK. Is who I guess that's the network, right? Apologies
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Apologies for the network. I guess we're all back.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so just before that, network issue. I was trying to introduce all our speakers for this event, and I was talking about Mr. George Akumas Jr. I was actually trying to give us a little bit of information about him, just so we know who we are expecting during the course of the conference. So I was saying that Mr. George Akumas Jr. is a dedicated advocate of leadership, a seasoned executive leadership coach, and a trainer based in the UK. He wholeheartedly immerses himself in leadership discussions, drawing from a profound understanding on the teaching and in-depth in the, so we can see that there is a lot of fire on, and so are definitely going to draw from that. Speaker that we have, Mr. Ismail D. Baje, another amazing speaker. He is the founder of the FEMA founder of CEO, actually, of, just to be sure that I'm not mixing it up. Yes, he's the founder and CEO of Innovax Global Health. Yeah, just to be very, very sure. He is. And then of the third speaker is Mr. Ken Giami, the executive chairman of the African Organization in the UK. So you can as well see that we have power packed speakers today. And time, we're going to jump straight into what we have today. And we'll be having our very first speaker, the of Mr. George. Is he? I think we have to wait a bit for him to join us. He's joining us in. Hold on. Mr. George is going to be joining us in a bit. I think he's here now. Yes, he's right here. Okay, so just give me a few up. Oh, yes, fantastic. Mr. George is here. Good morning, sir. Morning, Mr. George. I believe you can hear me. Okay, I need some time to talk, right? Okay. Good morning, Mr. George.
I think it's muted.
You're muted. Okay, the network
I
threw us all out again.
yeah, this yeah, I did, it did. I was one thinking it's from
Oh, yours, right? I was also
yeah,
thinking the same too, but apparently it threw all of us out.
what?
Okay, we're back again.
Yeah, we are.
Welcome to Nigeria.
We have a choice. We are
We don't
Nigerian.
have a
We have
choice, but this will
go on.
happen today. It's definitely happening. So we're back. Yes, happy to be here. I can see. Okay, I wish I could actually say hello to everyone here. Maybe I should try calling out the names. Okay, because I can see somebody saying happy to be here. Yes, we're happy that you're here as well. That's Mahoro Evelyn. Happy to be here. And then somebody writing in France. Oh, good. Wait, Damola, can you interpret that?
I think indeed. I think the
Can you
person is
try?
asking. Okay,
She's
communication.
asking about,
Which
yeah, I can see something about that. Oh, hi, Ayobami Joshua. Welcome. Good morning. Glad that you're here too. Apologies for the network issues. What can I say? What can we
sorry
say?
about
Sorry about it. Yes, yes, sorry about it. So, but we're gonna move on now. We're waiting for our speaker, Mr. George, to join us once again because he will be taking us in a bit. So while we wait for our speaker, let me still go and look around for I know Mr. Williams Ambrose. Mr. Williams Ambrose, hello, good morning.
good morning, Mr. George.
Let's see, who else are we saying hello to this morning? I wish I could pronounce the name of the person. Right? Checking the writer. Oh, okay. So I'm still saying hello to Ed Milson Aristides. Hello, good morning. Udo Dinalbi Michael Chibike. Good morning. And Emorike Christiana Oluwash. Good morning. Who else am I right here? So I can say hello. Hello to you. I think that's pretty much.
Okay, hello guys. Well, sorry about the mix-up. I think it's from the network. Could you please mute? Could you please mute? Okay, so we're sorry about this. We're really sorry about this. Okay, we might have to find a better option to address this. So we're going to have Mr. George right now, and then we'll begin speaking, and that is it. So very good. Okay, Mr. George, we're sorry about the mixed-up, sir. It is.
No problem. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please. We can hear you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. Let's do this. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Greed. Greed is good. Greed is good. Hold that thought. Now, before we dive right into this, I want to talk about my favorite movie. One of my favorite movies of all times, The Matrix. And there's one particular scene in The Matrix that resonates with me and applies to what's going to happen here today. And if you've seen The Matrix, you will recall that pivotal scene that changed the gear of the whole movie when Neo was offered by Morpheus two pills, a red pill and a blue pill. Now, if he took the blue pill, he will go on continuing his existence as it was before, ignorant bliss, ignorant of everything that was happening around him, caught up in a mundane life that had no meaning, that wasn't even real. If he took the red pill, however, his life would change forever. He will peek behind the curtains. He will see the world as it really was. He will see the pain. He will see the joy. He will find purpose. And he will see reality. Why am I saying this? We have roughly, let's say, 15, 20 minutes. And if you want to continue your existence as it was before, I suggest you log off now and log back in at 10:50 when I'm done. If you stay on this call for the next 20 minutes, I assume that you have agreed to take the red pill and whatever happens is on you. I'll give you 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. That means if you're still here, that you're ready to do this. So let's do this. Now, first of all, I'm not going to talk about greed. I'll try not to talk about greed from an institutional point of view, where we look at what's happening in terms of corruption in society, with the government and all of that. That's well documented. There are articles, there are reviews, there are blog posts, there are videos, name it, out there. What we need to do has been recommended in countless papers. There's conversations about transparency, accountability. That is all there. I want to talk about me and you. So this is not a lecture. There's no notes. I'm not even 100% sure what I'm going to say today. I want us to flow as we go along. I want you to talk to me. I want this to be a conversation. Because I can talk from now till I'm blue in the face. I can do a whole 12-week lecture on this. I can do, name it, and things will remain the way they are. Nobody has the power to change you apart from yourself. No one has the power to change anything apart from you. So this is going to be a journey into the past. Because if we want to be sure what we're going to, if we want to gain clarity about where we're headed, we must first of all need to understand where we're coming from. This is a journey of self-discovery, where you get to know yourself better, where I get to know myself better, and look at how we can change tomorrow. Ready? All right. First of all, let's start by defining what greed is. And I don't know, I can't see the chat, so if someone can read out to me definitions of greed. What do we think greed is? What do we think is greed? And what do we think is the issue with greed? Why is it such a big deal? See if we can define that. Anybody offer any suggestions?
Am I allowed to talk?
Of course you are. Of course you are. I'm hoping you would.
Okay. So from my own point of view, I think that greed is the excessive desire for something, even at the fact that you have enough.
Ooh, that's a tricky definition. Who defines enough? But I like that. That excessive desire. Another interesting word to use. Yep. Anyone else? Remember, you took the red pill. I didn't ask you to. So if you're here, that means you're ready for this.
Okay, so William said, greed is to want more than you have.
What's wrong with wanting more than I have?
Hmm.
Is it ambition? It is a part of it. You've touched on a certain element of it, but it's not just that. What's wrong with wanting more?
Greed. Can I talk?
Sure, of course you can.
Okay. Greed is a selfish desire to want something.
Ooh, you said the magic word.
Selfish.
It's not about wanting more. It's not about being better. It's not about anything. It's about the motive. That selfish desire. And where did it come from? Has it always been there? Of course. It's at the very base of the dark side of human nature, the shadow self. But why is it such an issue today? Let me tell you why. So I am beginning to tap into more of who I am as a Nigerian, as an Igbo person, as a person from my village and my community. I'm beginning to understand more how important that is. Tapping into our ancestral societies, you will be proud. And it's sad because I remember the first time I got into all this was in primary school, social studies back then, when I actually enjoyed it for the first time, reading about the Fulani empires, about the Oyo empires, about the Hausa bands and Hausa Bakwai, about the sons of Oduduwa, that whole rich tapestry, the stories that were told about where we came from, the great empires, the rich Malian empires, what the Akan tribe, the Maasai in Kenya. It was such an amazing story back then. If we look at our traditional societies, corruption was frowned upon. When we look at our Asian societies, if you're a thief, you're ostracized. It's a shameful thing. That was because we had something called values. Hold on to that word. Because greed is a virus, and I'll show you as over the course of the next few minutes and time myself properly. Greed is a virus, and it's one of those viruses that keeps on mutating to the point where you don't even realize you're sick, but you see it in other people. And the antidote to that, the vaccine to that, is what you call values. And I'll tell you stories of people who have demonstrated this. The values were bravery, honesty, hard work was celebrated, community. We celebrate Ubuntu now as South African philosophy, but it was part of who we are as an African continent, all across the continent. There are different names for it, where it was not about you, but about your community, that everything that was done was for the benefit of the community. Our sense of identity was tied to the community. And I'm sure the other speakers here would recognize when we were kids back in the good old days, where if you go to your neighbor's house and you misbehave, if you mess around and you get smacked by your neighbor, she's allowed to smack you. And when you come back, your mom will smack you too for disgracing her outside. So the child is reared by the community. We understood who we were. We belonged to each other. That your neighbor's child misbehaving will be a menace to society tomorrow, and it was your responsibility to take care of him. A child is reared by a village. That was who we were. Spirituality. We had it. It's different from what we have now. The Amadion has, the Amadion has, the Shangos, the Oguns, name them. They represented, again, how our forefathers represented their values, strength, valor, hard work, honesty, justice. And people held on to these values very, very tightly. Then they came. And what they did is that they broke down these traditional values. They replaced it with what they had in their countries. It was no longer about the collectivist society, which is what Hofstadter calls the cultural variable, where people are, where the community has precedence over the individual. That wasn't what they had. They were coming from an individualistic society where you do what you do for you, where it was about you above anybody else. And what they did is that it wasn't about strength in numbers. They gave us greed is good. That's what drove competition. That's what drives competition. That's what drives capitalism. That's what drives the society where we're competing against each other, where who is better, who drives the fastest cars. That drives a culture of money, where it's about showmanship, where it's about being, we have reality shows that are the fakest things on the planet, where everybody wants to be like them. And what happens to us, or what happened to us, is that we lost our sense of identity. We forgot who we were and where we were coming from. Classic example. I gave a talk some years ago at Federal Charter Commission, Nigeria, Senator Committee hearing, and doing the research for that address, I found out that the Yorubas had this thing about restorative justice. That the whole idea of justice wasn't to punish anyone. It wasn't a case of you win, you lose. That justice was about how do we restore the harmony of our society. And this story about the man who caught his son-in-law stealing his yams, and then he ties into a tree with the yams around his neck in the morning. And when people were passing by in the morning, they were criticizing the guy. How would he steal his father-in-law's yams? But when the father-in-law left him there the whole day and late into the evening, when people were coming back, they started criticizing the father-in-law. How could he be so wicked? That whatever justice was supposed to restore that balance. That has changed. That any job you had or anything you had in life was to improve your community. During festivals, the richer people will share with the poorer. Not anymore. It's about you, 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 you. It's so sad that even when it comes to our spirituality, that has changed. And this is how you know you're infected or not. This is a simple test to know whether you're infected. The whole concept of spirituality in those days was about divinity, about how we connect with each other. It was about purpose. It was about everything else apart from materialism. It was looking for something deeper. Currently, if your religion and your prayer every day is for God to give you more, 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 you're infected with greed. If your spirituality is connected to materialism, then there's a problem. Because that was supposed to counterbalance whatever brought about greed or wherever greed is coming from. Your spirituality, that connection to everybody else, will still counterbalance that. But if you don't see that, if it's give me more, give me more, give me more, sometimes giving more at the expense of somebody else, a job you're not qualified for, you haven't worked hard for, you believe that your spirituality gives you the right to have that job over somebody else. And can you still hear me since I've lost everyone? I will keep on going in faith that you can still hear me. So if your spirituality is tied to materialism, then there is a big problem. And the thing about greed is that it disguises itself to the point sometimes that we don't realize we're being greedy. Or we find ways to justify our excessive desire for more, our selfish desire for more, often at the expense of others. That our lack of values has become a problem because spirituality doesn't exist anymore. The culture that supported communalism doesn't exist anymore. Our sense of identity as part of our community doesn't exist anymore. That we're no longer shamed for stealing or for the vices or for greed. We're celebrated when we're able to accumulate more, 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 more. And that is the problem. Did you lose me? I'm still here, right?
Yes, you are, sir. You are. Long held as well.
All right, great. So what do we do now? Is there a remedy? Is there a cure for this? It depends. It depends. Why do I say that? You need to start by asking yourself, why? Why do I want more? Why? I was talking to a friend of mine, Tocho Kafo, a wellness coach, a Nigerian wellness coach the other day. And our conversation, she's come up with some great recipes and stuff. And she made a statement, I need a bigger kitchen. Now, it wasn't a bigger kitchen because she wanted to show off, or she wanted to compare with somebody else, or she wanted to feel good about herself in comparison to someone else. No, it was to continue to be able to create the value that she's creating. If you cannot answer why, you cannot give an answer to the question why you want more, then there is a problem. If you're comparing yourself to somebody else, then there is a problem. Start with why. The very first thing you need to do. Secondly, define your set of values. I had the amazing fortune of talking with Professor Nanoti over a period of 1 week, about a month ago. And those of you who don't know her, she is the vice chancellor of FUTO, and at some point was the Abia State chief returning officer during the last elections, and came under intense pressure to rig the election for her candidate. And she said no. Now, I can't divulge the details of the conversation or the amounts that were being named, but somebody else was offered over £1 billion just to get certain people into the same room with her. That's £1 million. I no go lie. When I heard that, I shook. I asked myself, I'm not rigging an election, no. I didn't do anything wrong, go. Just to introduce this person to this person, £1 million. Can you imagine how much she would have been offered? But for her to say no and say, I don't even want to have that conversation. I don't want to hear what you want to say, was profound. When I asked her why, she said, and it wasn't something that happened all of a sudden. It wasn't because she suddenly became religious or she suddenly became, this was a value she has always held on to from the very beginning: contentment. That she already found what was enough for her. She already defined what she needed. She also already defined how she was going to get whatever else she needed. And those life-changing amounts to change that were not worth her soul. We could find a way to justify it, as some people did. We could find a way to say, you know what, they're still going to rig anyways. If I don't think somebody else would do it, why not? Greed. And if you don't clearly define what your values are, the goalposts will keep on shifting till you barely recognize yourself. There's another young lady, Debbie, who owns an agency here in the UK. And when people were selling this certificate sponsorships for 10,000 million, 10 million naira, 12 million naira, she refused to do that. When I asked her why wouldn't you? The people who do it have clean consciences. They're okay with what they're doing. She says, no, there are better ways to make money than at the expense of other people. What are your values? You must clearly define who you are, not on social media. Because I must mention that greed comes from a place of insecurity, comes from a lack of want, comes from a place of want, things you were deprived of, and all of a sudden the opportunity to go crazy. If you don't have values, you will lose control. Now, if you came here thinking that we're going to talk about them, then you're affected too. That's a problem. That we can't change anyone else apart from ourselves. And when Professor Oti did what she did, what happens that she became a rallying point for everybody else who believed in change, who believed in the virtues she professed, who believed in democracy, who believed in what she believed. That when you are able to clearly define your values and stand for what you believe, when you're able to say no, when they can't buy you, you begin to form a tribe. There are about 300 people who are registered today. Imagine if 300 of us here today took that stand to not be greedy. Then you will have a tribe of the top. There's a tribe of people like Nijas, like the Godswill, like the Emmanuel Johnsons, people, the Kingsley Wazirs, the people, the Centuries, who will gather around you to support you and what you're doing. You become a movement. You become a movement, but it starts with you deciding. So ask yourself, why am I greedy? You have to find an answer to that question. Define what your values are, and then start to build a movement. Remembering where you're coming from, that what the world is showing you, and it's crazy. I mean, there are many stories. Who here knows what the word ekwensu means? Anybody in the chat? Anybody? Where's the moderator? Okay, nobody seems to be here. All right, so okay, you're back. I was asking, does anybody in the chat, has anybody said anything about who is Ekwensu? Have they defined that? All right, I'll go ahead. Um, Traditionally, we were taught that that was the word for devil or Satan. But doing some research recently, I found out that that was not who he is in Igbo mythology. That Ekwensu in Igbo mythology is equivalent to Loki, and we all love the Thor movies. That he was the Igbo god of mischief, of cunning, and he was the patron god of the traders. That he was the god who stole fire from the other gods to bring to man. Like I said, these stories showed us how the values that our forefathers had. That being cunning or being smart was a virtue, not being greedy, not stealing. But when they came to translate, when they brought Christianity to us and they looked for a word to translate to devil or Satan, they took the word for Gwen, the mischief god, like Loki, and translated that. And that's how we have lost out something entirely different, something that we've lost our roots because we're not been able to ask questions. Go back and ask questions. Understand where you're coming from and what was important to your tribe, to your people. What values did they espouse? And I can promise you that if you tap into your identity, who you are, we can make a difference. So I have only 2 minutes left. Are there any questions? This is supposed to be a conversation. I've been talking nonstop. Do we still have time for a few questions? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? That's about my time. Oh, there we are.
Yes, I hear you. I can
Great.
hear you.
Any
Sorry.
questions? Any questions? If there are no questions, I'll sign out. Or any comments? Okay, then I think that's my time. Just have a minute left. Well, are there any questions? Anyone wants to have a conversation about this? I think Miracle has my details. Just send me a message and I'd love to engage with you. So thank you very much for having me. Am I... Hello?
Okay, hello. Can anybody hear me? Good morning, Mr. Ismail. Can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you.
All right. So sorry for the network issues. We're actually working on it at the moment. You're very much welcome, sir.
Thank
Glad
you.
to have you here. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for staying with us. It is still the West African Youth Leadership Conference, tag the impact of greed in West Africa's leadership. And of course, our very first speaker, Mr. George Akumas, actually started off on a good note. We're able to pick out a few things from it was quite practical. And I was able to learn a lot, but because of time, we'll just go straight in. Right there on stage, you can see Dr. Ismail Badje. I hope I got that correctly.
Yeah, you did.
Badje, right?
Yeah, you
Okay,
did.
so Dr. Ismail Badje, he's the man behind the success story called
I, I think I lost you there. I'm having a hard time hearing you. I think I lost you there. You're not audible on my end. Let's see. Are you able to hear me? Yeah, hello? I am having a hard.
Yeah, good day, Mr. Ismail.
Yes, I could hear. I could
Yes,
hear you
I could
perfectly.
hear.
I was just
I
having a
could hear
hard time
you
hearing
perfectly.
you.
I was just hear me right? All right, you're very much welcome to WAYLC.
Thank you.
And because of time, we'll hand over to you, sir.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And you guys could hear me just well, right?
Yeah, loud and clear. I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay,
I
fantastic.
guess start
I
off
guess
by
start
thanking
off
you
by
guys for the opportunity to speak and engage with you guys this morning. I think it's always a privilege and honor if we could discuss a lot of issues or opportunities and things we have to address that will shape, I think, the future generation of West Africa. I found it very interesting when the topic chosen was the impact of greed on West African leadership. Which, yes, I think everywhere you look on the continent, there's a lot of issues that you could easily point towards greed because it does stifle and it limits the amount of oxygen in the room for a lot of young, budding professionals, entrepreneurs, just people managing their daily lives have to deal with. I wanted to start my, I guess, my presentation more from a point of maybe not the word greed, but also the word poverty and the lack of prosperity. And I'll tell you guys why. I think oftentimes, although greed has been an issue on the continent, I think greed is not a West African problem. First of all, I think greed is a human problem wherever a select few people have access to abundance. I don't think human beings are wired to look and deviate that abundance where there's scarcity. And I think West Africa has been led from a place of scarcity and lack of poverty for so long that oftentimes leadership or leaders are a reflection of our society. So I think as we see a lot of agitation, a lot of conversations like this that we're having, that's also symptoms that the continent, West Africa, which we're very young. I always remind people that the average age in Africa is somewhere around 18 years old. If you extrapolate that to places like Gambia, the average age in Gambia is 16 years old. So oftentimes we speak about leadership in West Africa or anything Africa. Most of the times, the image that most people have at the back of their minds is maybe a 60 to 85-year-old African man in a position of power, which is also the ideology or the vision of leadership we've been accustomed to, because unfortunately throughout West Africa as well too, we have 60 to 85-year-old men typically still grappling with leadership to a point where a lot of new ideas are not being generated. I think a lot of young professionals who are typically in their professional and physical prime within the ages of maybe 25 to 55 are not leveraged enough in positions of leadership to impact change. So I think at the core of it, it starts with how we perceive leadership, but also how a lack of prosperity or poverty is creating systems in our countries, institutions where anybody who is put in a position of leadership to be able to lead from a place of, the whole notion that Simon Sinek says leaders eat last is not a concept that could flourish in Africa, because if you have been stifled with perceived scarcity or lack of prosperity, and you typically climb your way up the ladder using any mechanism in place, once you're put in a position of leadership, you are now wanting to make up for all what you felt like should have been yours from a prosperity standpoint. So you create an ecosystem where being put in a place to serve becomes you serving self first. And I think that is very almost like very common trend towards West African over the years, right? And the impact is grave because I think for every bad leader institutional has, I tend to say there's maybe a 1 to 5 ratio in terms of impact. For every year that that person is there, that damage could last 5 years. So I think we get frustrated in terms of why is not change happening, why our system's not working. At the root of it, any system that is led by a leader who is thinking from a place of greed or thinking from a place of not being democratic and allocating resources, the people who are experiencing that leadership in that moment may not see the consequences, but the future generations now lack things that should have been kickstarted 5 years ago. And when they arrive at a point where there's a need, it's missing. You could think that, put that in healthcare, for example, especially being a healthcare professional. I could tell you how, especially greed or lack of allocation of resources in West Africa from a leadership standpoint has impacted African healthcare. Oftentimes, healthcare is one of those things where when leadership is mentioned in healthcare, there's this affinity towards legacy projects. Most leaders in healthcare want the shiny 500-bed hospital. They want the big MRI machine. They want things that are tangible that you could point to and say, well, I made this purchase for the future generation. When, as you know, healthcare itself is more rooted in increasing access to preventative care, increasing access to quality medications, especially with the counterfeit medication that we have. A lot of things that are not as shiny or are not as attention grabbing, but require a more thought out strategic way of providing care in a more democratic way as well too. So oftentimes what ends up happening is allocation of resources, once again, driven by greed. Anytime you mention procurements, anytime you mention donor funds, anytime you mention any source of abundance of let's say resources for any particular reason, then you see the impact of, once again, scarcity, greed, whatever interchangeable way you want to use it. The percentage of that resource, of those resources that actually go to help somebody's grandmother in a village who may be, 2 hours away from the city, are very limited. So at the surface level, leadership could claim that there's improvement in healthcare, but if for every dollar that goes towards a particular reason, poor leadership and the impact of greed, the patients or the communities that should receive it may end up receiving maybe 10 cents of that dollar. So I think it creates this very big dynamic that I think has affected a lot of African nations. But on the flip side, I think there is hope. And sometimes I know we throw around the word hope often, but our generation without hope, I think it a lot of people will move into despair, or it could manifest in a way that could be self-destructive. And we're seeing, sometimes it's scary when we see a sentiment of West Africa of agitation, especially from the young people. Oftentimes that's like a hunger for a brand of leadership that's more rooted in democratized access to prosperity, even though some people may think that is a lofty aspiration in a capitalist world. But nonetheless, I think leaders will always be a representation of the people. So we could highlight the impact of greed in Africa, but also we have an opportunity now to also reinvigorate leadership in Africa. We have an opportunity to participate the right way in Africa in terms of selecting our leaders, but also demanding a clear and transparent way of handling affairs of institutions, affairs of nations, affairs of any organized society. And I think oftentimes that's where maybe we're not as persistent. And what do I mean by that? Number one, obviously, leadership oftentimes is granted to people through democratized ways. So increasing our level of civic education, especially amongst young people, to make them understand the power of their vote, the power of representation, the power of voice, um, increasing the percentage of women in leadership. Um, we don't have a strong sample size of, let's say, saturation. We don't know what saturation looks like when it comes to leaders who are women. But I think Africa stands to benefit from that significantly, because oftentimes women do make better leaders, but also Africa has been stifled by the elderly, African man being in a position of leadership to a point where most of our innate natures in terms of sharing allocation of resources, we're missing out on that. So I think as young Africans, young African women, leadership has to be an option, despite a lot of the cultural, and traditional norms that tend to steer people away from leadership. But I think that's Africa's potential. And then lastly, I think obviously being agents of change as young people is very important. I think, as I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, every organization, every country, the leadership is the reflection of the people. So if we constantly have leaders, if we constantly have institutions, maybe we don't have a critical mass of people who are truly committed to managing positions of leadership, not from a place of greed and abundance, but a place of sharing the prosperity, or giving people an opportunity to at least improve their lives. So it's a very complicated issue as a holistically, if you approach it that way, trying to impact the impact of greed. But I think it lasts generations. And oftentimes, by the time you realize how much damage has been done, how many resources have been embezzled, whatever institution, it could be a country, it could be a company, they are stuck at a place of deficit sometimes for decades later. So that's why every time we have a leader who's been in place for too long, every time we have institutions who finally get uncovered that have had practices of embezzlement, practices of just mismanagement of funds, once again, the victims or the people left holding the empty basket are always people who never had a chance to those resources anyways. But it will shape the future of Africa, especially now that anywhere you look around, it feels like the whole world is descending in Africa. And that has always been the case, but more so now we're seeing, I think, what is a second wave of people coming for the resources of Africa. And obviously, anywhere there's a place of abundance, there's a potential for greed. So how are we as a young generation going to be the gatekeepers of said resources? It could be natural resources, it could be human resources. Whatever is causing this attention, continued attention on Africa from outside of the continent, should be signs that we also have a potential to repeat the sins of our fathers, to repeat the same cycle of, on one end, there's massive accumulation of wealth by the small majority. And then on the other end, there's a pervasive growth of poverty, which leads to frustration, which leads to disenfranchisement, which sometimes leads to conflict. So I've always seen the time period that we're in right now for the continent as being vital in shaping what the future of West Africa is going to be. But at the core of it, it will definitely come down to the quality of the leadership. But I think for every place that you find somebody who is termed greedy or an embezzler, it's rooted in a mindset of scarcity. It's rooted in poverty, poor systems being put in place for so long that everybody tends to start fending for themselves. And I'll take a pause there, and I'm not sure if there were any particular questions, but that's definitely a good assessment of kind of how I see the continent and what we're struggling with in terms of the impact of poor leadership, impact of greed, impact of just not having leaders who are aligned with the right way as well. Okay, fantastic. It sounds like I still have an extra 7 minutes as well too. So yeah, so I think one thing I would add in terms of tangible next steps, especially I'm considering the whole concept is to spark ideas and inspire young people also to not only see what the issues have been, because I think we also have a tendency and I use the word young very loosely because on the continent oftentimes you'll be called young until you have a wife and 4 kids, just because leadership is always seemed to be older. But I think it's one thing to start identifying the problems, things that have stifled our continent. But I also think we need to have a more proactive approach to wanting to change a lot of these elements that have stifled our country, because pointing them out is one thing. And I think anybody you ask on the continent, once again, West Africa does not own greed. Africa does not own greed. And greed and management, poor leadership happens all over the world. I think it's more pervasive sometimes because there is an attention on greed, but corruptions and things of that nature. What saves a lot of nations is the amount of systems that are in place to serve as a buffer, where no matter how much greed may exist at the top layer, at the tip of the spear, there's enough allocations of resources and systems that work independent of the leader that allows a trickle down effect. But when it comes to greed, you could actually make an argument, as I mentioned earlier, that Africans did not invent greed. If anything, our systems historically have always been of altruistic in nature, a sense of community, a sense of sharing allocation of resources, pooling resources together to make sure nobody in our communities. That's the African identity. And I think sometimes we fail to mention that all the systems of governance systems that we have in place are not traditionally African. We inherited a lot of these systems after colonialism. And I think there's a direct link to that, to how a lot of systems that were put in place when a lot of African nations received independence were, one, not community-based, two, leaned more towards capitalism than it leaned towards socialism, which is not a bad thing. Capitalism is not bad, but we also have to be very careful to make sure we don't take ownership of elements that actually exist or existed even before West Africa is as we know it right now. And I think as young people, we have to also be very aware of time and space to make sure we don't pass down false narratives of things that are affecting our societies to make it seem as if it's an African problem. Because I think, if anything, Africa has also been a victim of poor leadership, yes, but also a victim of greed from the non-African nations or powers that be, that have, removed a lot of financial resources, taken advantage of the lack of awareness and poverty, creating or picking kings within places to make sure they ensure systems of corruption that continue. And I think that's very important from a historical context for us to realize that as African people, I do believe fundamentally that we're more altruistic in nature, and we understand what it is to pool resources to take care of everybody in the community. And it can reflect in a new brand of leadership if you combine the might, the wit, the intelligence of the young African right now with the acknowledgement and the respect for our traditions and our systems of governance of the past. There's a very tangible opportunity that we have as well too. And Oyin, I'll hand it back over to you. There you go. I think they're
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I'm so sorry that I was trying to resolve the whole issue that I was
no, you're
experiencing.
good.
Okay, so we might have another option. We might have to probably, if this persists, because I don't know why the website is currently having an issue. If it persists, we might have to have the panel session on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so for now, we're going to actually let Mr. Gihami come in. But before we let him come in, want to give an extra 5 minutes to round up so that we would then allow Mr. Giami come in.
Yeah, and that's to me, right?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I guess to just wrap things in a bow, I think that the time and space Africa is in is critical, because it's always felt like we're behind on the race. But I think oftentimes we fail to realize who we're really failing is that 10-year-old African right now who does not have the sense of awareness because they're worried about just what's in the four corners of their world. So that means if you're an African in a position where you can impact change through your voice, through your action, through entrepreneurship, through legislature, and once again, I consider the prime professional between 25 and maybe 55, we have a responsibility to dedicate what's left of our professional might to at least make it better for that 10-year-old African somewhere who, by the time they are 25, a lot of things that we're talking about now are things of the past. That is not only a responsibility that we have if we focus on internal and personal ways of achieving fulfillment in life. Africa arguably will not be at the same place it is now 5-10 years from now. It will be worse than what it is now, because one thing God has always blessed us with, it's a gift and a curse, is an abundance of resources in the soil, resources in our minds. So we will always be prime for harvesting. The only difference is who will be the harvester and what sharecroppers will share out to make sure no family is left unfed. And I think that's an existential question that we should ask ourselves, but also be willing to contribute no matter how little, even if it's a vote, even if it's participating for leadership, even if, raising our young women to believe that they are not only capable of being leaders, they are capable of becoming better leaders than what we've seen. So I think there's a collective responsibility that we all have. And forums like this is a starting point. So we're just sowing seeds of hope, sowing seeds of promise that I want to commend you guys for continuously doing as well too when it comes to the young leaders of our nation.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Okay, so I hope this doesn't happen again. So we're going to, we'll probably have to go into a brief panel section before Mr. Giami, Mr. Ken, because he currently has a meeting with some other stakeholders. So we're currently going to have to go into the panel session now. So we're putting Mr. George now. So Mr. George is from the UK, and I think Mr. Ismail, I think you're currently in the US.
Yeah, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So we want to go into the panel session now while we are waiting for Mr. Giami to join us. And so I'll briefly talk about the reason why I gave the topic, the theme, the impact of greed. And honestly speaking, the panel session has to be very, very honest. We want to be very, very honest, very transparent, not try to be diplomatic about these questions. So the first question is, we want to get your both opinions about it. Is it really possible? Is it really, really possible that I feel like greed is a product of, it's like an inherent thing in humans, but somehow it has eaten deep in Africa. At the same time, it also happens in the US, it happens in other nations as well too. So the question is it possible that we can actually raise a new generational set of leaders that would actually have the power to diffuse the impact of greed? And looking at the upcoming, is it really possible? So that's to Mr. George, and then
yeah, it is possible, but it's going to be an uphill battle because, like I was saying when I was talking, right, there are certain structures that we had in our society that made it that really, it wasn't a matter of trying to prevent greed. It was an identity thing, that being greedy was a vice. So if you were a greedy person, there wasn't room for it. It wasn't part of your identity. You grew up believing that this is our thing. It's a we thing. That's what you grew up believing, as opposed to greed is good. Let's make as much as we can. To fix that, we need to change the culture. And that's going to be an uphill battle, because look at influencers right now who are, I won't call their names, who are buying Gucci bags and stuff, and everybody wanted to be like them by any means necessary. You're looking at leaders who are um, um, robbing the nation blind, and one of them came back from prison and was being celebrated. Until we change that culture, which is why I said building community, until we get it right as at individual level, and then start building a community around us, we will struggle. If we can get that right and we discover who we were before talking about what we're going to, then there's hope for the rest of us, and they are gone. But you're here, Ismail, so I guess you can take over.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think just going back to what you said from a historical context is so important. Because even back before a lot of systems of managing affairs, I would even think of the Council of Elders.
Yes.
How back in the historical African, every stakeholder in the community had a say before any allocation of resources were made. So there was a level of transparency that now does not exist. So it's become the race to occupy one chair. You close the door behind you, and the rest of the nation has no idea how much we have, how much we don't have. But also systems around us are also enabling this behavior as well too, because they are also picking and choosing individuals on the content who would protect their interests, run their agenda, and then there's a proliferation of resources to individuals that are unworthy. But I think that is so true. It would take a generation. And I think we live in a microwave generation where we expect things to disappear. But I consider our generation lost in terms of seeing the fruits of our labor. But what we have left is to try to implement the structures, the systems, and in a very radical and unapologetic way of doing it. Because once again, if you want to ask for permission to change or take away the spoon that is feeding somebody, they'll never give that spoon to you. True. Right? So we have to just be willing to change it in a very unapologetic way and ask for forgiveness more than we would ask for permission if along the way a lot of people, struggle with the change.
I mean, I think one thing we could do, because I'm really concerned about leaving here right now and not looking at it from, what they need to do. What can we do? I think everybody who's watching this program now should go back and find out where they came from, what their values were, find out what were your stories, because embedded in the stories of our tribes lie the values. I'm fortunate. I'm doing some work with Miva Open University now, and they're beginning to look at decolonizing the curriculum, because the curriculum we teach in Africa right now is what they gave us, which promotes their values. We don't have that communalism anymore because it's not being taught in schools anymore.
Oh, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And it's designed to create one of something that is celebrated very, very well. So everybody else is left thinking they don't have a way to arrive at this, fictional place that we've also created. So even from a child, you're telling them, okay, you are the brightest in the class, you could speak the best. So you create this idea of one, so it becomes a lot of vitriol when it comes to people fighting, which brings the whole crab in a bucket mentality. But also people that are gifted in their own little way never get to actualize their true potential, because the education system has defined what success, what intelligent is. So the best, craftsman or the best, most creative person in the world, just because they're not good at chemistry and physics, could grow up thinking that they don't belong or have right to leadership. So I think the curriculum, especially as an educator, I'm glad you mentioned that, because so many of our issues are rooted in this system of education that was not only we didn't inherit, we were force-fed the system. And now that we've seen the world and seen the disparities, we understand that there's an urgent need to change the wiring of young children, for sure.
I agree with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Have we lost them?
Yeah.
Do we just continue the conversation to the
And I wonder if they're connecting from the continent, which, if you look at a lot of our infrastructure steps.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Right.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why it's happening, but we might have to find a way to.
It's okay.
You're good.
Okay, so I think Mr. Ismail has given his opinion about that.
Yes.
Okay, so the other question, which I believe a lot of young people would want to really know, is this: we are actually suffering. Like, if we want to say, if we want to be realistic with the fact that a lot of us are on the disadvantaged side. So I saw a movie, and the movie is called Chopper. Is it Chopper? Yeah, Chopper. It's like a drug lord movie, and I saw how they were able to use money to get people, so they could sense the greed in the other person, and then they could give their price. So the man knew, okay, I think your price is like $1 million, and he says, no, that's not $1 million, that's $2 million, and that's because of the suffering in the nation as at that time. And so
I sense a question coming on, and we lost him.
Yeah, we've lost him again.
Give him a minute. But it's interesting. I mean, from where he was coming from was an interesting question about poverty and how that affects the situation. Like I said earlier, that greed comes really from scarcity, from want, and then but the systems don't prohibit you anymore. Once you get into that position, you want to engorge, and it doesn't help that the movies also drive that. It was interesting as how that problem can be solved. Again, with people who are watching today, I have a friend of mine who, Emeka Nobis, who from as soon as he could started paying someone else's school fees. And if we are not giving, if we are not getting, which is another antidote to greed, that being grateful and giving more, if we are not giving to improve someone else's life, then why would we expect someone else to do that?
Yeah, and that speaks to the core moral values. If it's not in us by the time we arrive, and like they say, a lot of these leadership positions, they don't build your character. They reveal who you've always been for so long. So a bad person with money becomes a villain, right? It's not, you have all the tools at your disposal. I think somebody who's naturally altruistic with money becomes a philanthropist, or becomes somebody who's naturally a giver. So it's almost unrealistic to expect somebody who's been a certain way inherently be put in a position of power and then expect them to be, a saint. Sometimes that's what we feel, but I couldn't agree more. The scarcity part is so important. But even sometimes your closest community, it could be your immediate family, would be the ones who tell you, you've suffered for so long. Now you're in a position to take care of us, feed us first. So it creates also, for one person who makes it, you have your nucleus of people who in their eyes, it's time for us to chop. Now is our time. So they dedicate that moment not to thinking outside, but internally, because once again, systems, they were probably working for the government. They were getting poor wages. They were seeing their superiors embezzle money. And all of them were like, okay, it'll be my time first. It'll be my time. So the moment they get a chance to sit in that chair, one, they don't know how long that chair is going to be theirs. So they dedicate all their time and energy towards that. But also, two, they realize that I have a small amount of time to maximize as much wealth and security for myself, because this system hasn't taken care of me for so long. So now it's my time to take from the system. So that is so common, especially when it comes to the government side of things, even though there's still greed in the private sectors as well too. But yeah, it's just that scarcity. It's such a huge problem.
And it's really sad, because what they fail to understand is that you get into power, and it's really hard to tell them, oh, that you shouldn't do that, when, like you said, they've sat down quietly watching somebody milk the system. They're just bidding their time. It gets to their turn, and you say, don't be greedy. Hell no.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen. But also, I think part of it too is Africa, and I'm glad you mentioned earlier that we need to start thinking about how we look east, because we've looked west for so long. Because I think the cream of the crop in terms of might, not that people on the continent are less intelligent than Black people that are not on the continent, but I think exposure opens your lens to see the effects of something from a, you could look at it from a bird's eye view sometimes. And if you're stuck within systems, removing yourself from the system is your best opportunity to try to fix that system, right? But what has also happened is a lot of times if we look west and we never look back, we are allowing people that if Africa was at saturation in terms of intellectual capacity, right? At saturation, a lot of people in positions of leadership would not have a way forward because cream would rise to the top. So a lot of our systems, infrastructure, political organizations, that's because the best of the continent, the best minds that the continent has produced are still not at a saturation point on the continent. They're being harvested out, right? So, and I know it creates a lot of discomfort in terms of uncomfortable conversations, diaspora wars back and forth. But the reality is we've suffered more from human resources being drained out of the continent than we have natural resources, because those things are recurrent in abundance. But a human mind has a finite amount of time to impact the world. And unfortunately, we keep losing more and more to systems. So we're left sometimes with the B team representing the nation.
Yeah, and I totally understand. I mean, you're in the US, I'm in the UK. That sometimes, like you say, you need to leave the system. Again, you didn't get a better view of what's happening in the system. I try as much as possible, I'm sure you do, to try to contribute to what's going back home, to try and influence the conversation going back home. There is no place like home at the end of the day. Wherever you want to go, you're still African, you're still Nigerian. If they pick your bones 1,000 years from now and trace your genealogy, they will come back to the western part of Africa. And something about being home that's really important. I think part of the frustration too is because the system doesn't seem to work, and they're not separating people. And I think the key to that actually is when we begin to make government irrelevant, in the sense that, take for instance, education. If we're worried about what's happening in the educational sector, this guy who does Takedia has come back to create a system there. What the guy who owns Konga is doing with Miva University now, where we have the freedom to, I mean, I'm talking about the classic curriculum for like forever, but now there's a chance to do that. It's on distance in class. That we need to create these things for ourselves. We need to build a community for ourselves if we want to make that change. Waiting for the government is not going to happen anytime soon.
I couldn't agree more. I'm a living embodiment of it from a healthcare standpoint, because we could stand in the diaspora and keep criticizing what's wrong. Government doesn't have enough medications, enough doctors as well too. But most of the times, especially if it's something that you could serve, you make the government irrelevant, because people are going to gravitate towards where their value is being created anyways. And if value is created independent of systems, you're actually also not only building better systems, you're showing people the right way of doing things can exist from a sustainable way. Now, it'll be twice as hard there than anywhere else in the world, but it takes that level of friction for you to get traction as well too. So absolutely. We depend too much sometimes on, let's wait until our government and our leaders are correct, when statism, if anything, put us in a disadvantage where we start thinking state solves all the problems, when the government should not be in the business of being in business most of the times anyways. But that's where a lot of governments are kind of left to.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. For those watching, I was going to add that a good example of what we're talking about is Obe Ezekwesili and her school, SPPG, School of Politics, Policy, and Governance. Obe Ezekwesili was one of the people that started the Transparency International. She was one of the founding directors of Transparency International, right? But she's taken all that and come back home and started this with foreign funding. It's not government funded, not even a school per se, but you can come in and learn how politics is supposed to work and how good governance it looks like. And she's doing that. And I think of the last admission, had over 300 people. And that's what it takes to make it different.
It does. Absolutely.
Sorry, Miracle.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm so sorry once again about that. Okay. So the question I initially wanted to really say was how things are so bad, especially, let me use Nigeria as an example. Currently, we have an issue of our presidents in the court, and somehow we're just finding ways to really cover up a lot of things and all that. And so a lot of young people are asking, Miracle, is there really hope, in the sense that if we have leaders that are actually blocking, so there are two things they said: is that you risk dying or you join them. Now, young people do not want to die. We do not want to die. Do not want to die. But when the pressure to actually succumb to a system, how do we respond? How do young people respond to the pressure to actually succumb to a system that is governing a state? How do young people actually, like respond to it? That okay, if you cannot join them, if you cannot beat them, you join them. How?
I think we've answered that question. I think you missed it, Miracle. We had that conversation while you were away, basically making government irrelevant and doing things outside of government. But to add to that, right, the thought about not wanting to die, you need to want it badly enough to make a change. And I mean, was it Patrick Thomas? What's guy's name again? Give me freedom or give me death. The American Revolution. One of the most powerful stories I've heard was of the 75, the Igbo 75, who were taken to the US, right? But rather than be slaves, they overcame their captors, and 75 people walked into the ocean and drowned themselves against every fiber in their body. So I'm not asking anybody to go out there to die, but you must want it so badly that you go out there to make a change. It must be every fiber in your body must resist what they're doing. You will find a way. Like I said before you came in, we're talking about doing stuff outside the government, and we give that example of SPG and what Ismail is doing too. Yeah. So I don't know if that was anything to that, Ismail.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and I could agree more. And I don't even want to come off sounding too radical in terms of, but sometimes you could be radical in ideology, but very effective in terms of your strategy, right? And I think as young people, we have to approach it from that perspective. And I think education is so key, because the funny thing is, when Africa and a lot of these Black societies, even African Americans in America, it was young people in their early 20s who were organizing in an effective way. Fred Hampton, MLK, all of them, if you look at them, they were not 45 years old. These were 18, 19, 21, 22-year-olds who knew, even when Fred Hampton said you could kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution, right? It's not inciting violence or radicalism on the continent, but just having a strategic approach to understand that we're also playing the long game. One thing about life is, no matter how much stranglehold somebody has on a nation, on an institution, Father Time is undefeated. So if you're going to war with somebody who's 60 and you're 20, it is impossible for them to run a 40-year race compared to you. So one, we need to activate as many 20-year-olds with the right information in their mind, and then organize and communicate strategically in a way that, back in the day, I doubt a lot of young Gambian professionals were speaking to Nigerian professionals about how do we change this thing called West Africa, right? So we have to consolidate not only resources, but also start knowing that we're not going to win the race. No system in Africa is going to change in 10 years. That's been there for 50 years. It's impossible. But Africa also is so young that if we want to see Africa 400 years from now, our grandchildren are going to look at Africa at 60, 70 years old like, what were those guys doing, right? So we also are very young, but I believe in critical mass. The more Africans in their 20s that get impacted, empowered with the right information, right education, they start playing the long game of changing Africa 50 years from now, when we'll be the most populous nation in the world, we'll be the richest continent in the world. It's reaching critical mass. So I think, to answer your question, yes, but also let's not play the short-term game, because we're unable to win. But if everybody in all their sectors start just moving slowly, we would run a good race. In 30 years. Dr. Comas and I will be old and not strong enough to do it anymore. But hopefully we would have planted enough seeds of young leaders who are empowered with the right education that is of African brand, right? and then you start sowing seeds of hope. Because if not, right now, there's no system in Africa that is going to change overnight, unless you are a nation that hits rock bottom, which is not something you wish for nations anyways, to hit rock bottom, because very few come out of it.
See, my also add something to what you just said now, right? And it's really powerful. You said something earlier on, and it's true that our leaders are a representation of the people. They came from us. They are a snapshot of who we really are. And if anybody watching this now is thinking about them, you are part of the problem. So to tap into what Ismail said, ask yourself, is there a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old who looks up to me? I want to be a better leader. If you are not setting an example to inspire anybody else, you are part of the problem. It's not just about them. It's about what am I doing? What are we doing? What are you doing today to inspire somebody else? And I'm not talking about unconsciously, proactively and intentionally trying to teach that younger person, trying to be a role model of that younger person, set an example of that younger person to look up to. If you're not doing that, you're part of the problem.
Absolutely.
Wow. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, so someone is asking a question here, and the person said, Mr. George, you mentioned something about decolonizing the educational structure. What should be taught in school then?
Who you are, where you're from.
Nigeria.
Example, right? Wait, let me give 2 examples, actually. Part of the work I'm doing right now. So I'm creating a course on leadership and governance and elements of marketing for Miva Open University. The guy who owns Konga really wants to revolutionize the educational space and has created this online university. Now, leadership and governance, I'm going back to pre-colonial governance. What were the structures in place then? What are the values in place then? How were the old, the Ondo, the Benin, the other kingdoms governing themselves? And what was the effect of colonialism? They don't teach us these things, right? In terms of marketing, there's a young man who was the brand manager, Chidera, for brand manager for Gala, and then a couple of other big brands in Nigeria. And he's working on a textbook now. We're talking about doing a marketing textbook for Nigeria, because the way you do marketing in Nigeria is different from the rest of the world. The marketing is totally different. They don't teach us that. So they're teaching us how things work in their country, which is capitalist driven. We are multi-ethnic. We have different cultures, even within Nigeria. Our wants and our needs and our problems are totally different. And if we are not looking at how things were working before, how do we fix things moving ahead? So where we're coming from, let's go back to our basis. Let's understand what was happening before colonialism and what our real problems are. That's what we should teach in school. So the education helps you solve problems, not think like somebody else.
Wow, thank you so much, sir. Okay, so the other question is this, and I think it's something that really disturbs me a lot, and it's the ability to actually discern and then realize young people that are interested in leadership. Because oftentimes, so someone went through my profile and person saw, oh, you have small views. It's no wonder you're having this one. You can't get views because of look at what you're doing and all that. And so the question I want to ask is, how can young people, stay in their field despite the glaring factors around them to want to, gain, now you judge the content, you judge content by how many views they have, in respect of the fact that even it has good content, it still would not really yield result. So how can young people stay in their place? So let's say I've been called into leadership, but then I'm not seeing results. I'm not seeing so much results in it. How can I stay there even if I'm not seeing so much result, and not be carried away by the fact that, oh, I'm seeing someone doing this other field and I want to go into it? How?
I think my question is, whose metric are you using to measure results? I think that's something that's missing. In this day and age, the downside, media has allowed for platforms like this to happen that 10, 20 years ago, it couldn't happen. But also it's created a lot of noise and few signals. And unfortunately, a lot of young people are following more of the noise than signals. I think most people have a spiritual foundation. Whatever medium, you have a spiritual foundation. It's as African as pounded yam. It's everybody has a spiritual foundation. What you do the moment you realize that it's not even yours, it's a responsibility. You are God's instrument. You start measuring results and success from metrics that are not yours, right? And I think that's the missing root. Most people, young people that you meet that are maybe frustrated, probably going through depression, they're measuring success and results using metrics that's not for them, right? And it almost sets them up to a point where the true gift that they have to make this world better, they'll never live it through because of what's happening, right? So for you in turn, there's something every single day that when you wake up, there's something spiritual that tells you that what you're doing is the reason why you are actually alive, right? Everybody's not going to wake up and feel that way. And maybe that could be high level philosophy, but at the core of it, I always start asking people, whose metric are you using to gauge results? Whose metric are you using to gauge success? Because even if you are a carpenter and you make 5,000 chairs and nobody buys one chair, they could be one grandmother somewhere who's on a wheelchair who's been looking for your chair. And even if that one person's life is better because the chair that you created and crafted with gifts that God not only gave you, but rented to you, right? Then you start measuring different. So we have a responsibility once again in terms of we've lost some of the generation, but that young kid going back to education, we should start making them realize that success is not a metric you use to measure from a place of vanity, but it should be measured from a place of purpose and fulfillment. And then honestly, everything else comes together as well too. That's the best way I could answer something like that.
Beautifully put.
Mr. George, what about you?
If someone's asking that question already, I'm already worried about that person. If you're already asking yourself, how do I stay in my lane? It makes me begin to wonder, do you know your purpose? And like someone said, apart from measures, why even measuring? What is standard? So it's not just about likes, it's about purpose, about impact. But listen, like, let's be honest, we do live in a society where peer pressure and the world as we know it is changing. So we are being judged, and it takes someone actually sitting in silence and reflecting a bit more. But sometimes it's the spaces of silence that we find purpose. To really understand what's going on. But if you are struggling with that and you are trying to look for meaning, my advice is, first of all, build yourself a proper tribe. People with a like minds. So at the end of the day, it's not about how many people like what you're doing, but how much you're able to contribute to the conversation, how much you're able to contribute to society, how much of an impact you're leaving behind, how useful you're becoming, not how many people like you. I struggled with someone that was coaching once who wanted to be a nice person. I said, no, that's a problem. Nice is other people's opinions of you, which means you don't have an opinion of yourself. You want to be good. Good means you have a standard, you have morality, a code of conduct that you want to follow. So build yourself a proper tribe. I have a tribe of people who support me, who encourage me, who are building stuff together, who bring ideas, who we keep on working on together. I mentioned their names earlier on today. Somebody might be on this program right now. So do that for yourself. Look for a tribe, build yourself a tribe, build yourself an ecosystem. Law of average says you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Find your 5. Find your 5. And then these other questions will be relevant.
And honestly, sometimes just turn it off. Sometimes something could be as easy as just turning it off. Don't consume something that consumes you. It's as simple as just turning it off, because we keep consuming. It's like the friends. If anytime you're around somebody who, when you leave, you're drained, you're not inspired, turn them off. If you're consuming social media content that's leading to depression, that makes you feel that you're less than, you're not a prisoner who has handcuffs and the screen is glued to your face. Just turn it off. I think we also have lacked the ability, and I think it's interesting, there's studies being done where young kids more and more lack the ability to sit still by themselves without being stimulated. So we're losing the ability to self-reflect and internally correct our inner wirings because we're always on or stimulated by something. So we've become addicted. So just turn it off oftentimes, and then when you're silent, that's when you really truly know what you should be doing, where you are in life, and it allows you to be the most honest with yourself, knowing that there's only you and the higher power who gets to understand everything that's going on. But just turn it off.
Sorry, let me add to
Wow.
that too. Turn it off and slow it down. Let me
Yes.
add that part too, because I was interviewing Yon Sako, who was he was the MD of Unilever Nigeria and Ghana, and then global vice president some time ago on leadership. When I asked him the difference between leaders then and now, it was about slowing things down. So back in those days, war was staved off because if somebody writes a letter that upsets you and you start to reply, you're writing it by hand. You're very careful what you're saying because you don't want to have to cancel it, start all over again. So you were thinking about what you were writing. You had time to reflect. And sometimes, like, should I say this? Should I not say this? But now, click, 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 click. We type fast and we think. And we respond. We're wired to respond to everything. The fear of missing out. We're so sometimes turn it off. Sometimes slow things down a bit. Ask yourself some questions. Take time to reflect about what you want to be intentional. And again, so this is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much, sir. And I think this question, I wrote about this, and I don't know if this question is from me. How do we we all understand the meaning of mentorship, but how do we mentor young people such a way that they don't desire to imitate exact move that we make? Because for me, I spoke to a young man reached out to me recently, and he said, Miracle, I want you to mentor me. And I said, okay. He said, no, that's fine, but I just don't want you to lose yourself. And as time went on, I realized that he was doing exactly what I was doing. It was doing exactly. So I was seeing myself in him. Finally, it felt good. But then I felt like, no, you're not meant to be like me. I think you have yourself. Probably just find yourself and become good at being yourself. And after a while, I realized that he stopped doing what I was doing. So I was waiting for like 6 months, and I went back to check him, and I realized that he wasn't doing all those things anymore. And so the question is, how do we mentor young people in such a way that they don't become like us, but rather they find themselves and grow in themselves?
I have a very interesting relationship with the word mentor. I actually don't like the word. I like coaches for a particular reason. If you're a bad footballer and a coach is going to tell you you can't dribble with your left foot, why are you trying to be a left foot player, right? Sometimes mentors, we could fall into the trap of creating fanboys and fangirls where it's cult of personality, right? And I heard Vusi Tembakwaya, he used a word called maps and mirrors, which is my philosophy to mentoring. Map, where do you want to go? And a mirror, what do you see when you look in the mirror? Are you ready? Do you have the skills? Do you have the discipline? That way the burden is not on me to create something that you have to do the work, right? And oftentimes it changes the conversation from a place of, let me tell you how I got to do everything that I did, which could be luck, it could be, you name it, happenstance, to where are you now? Where do you want to go? And how are you going to get them go? And everything I tell you may be irrelevant, but maybe for every 10 things I tell you, one may be useful to you. But at the end of the day, you have to do the work. And oftentimes what I find through the years is people that I have that kind of relationship is laced with so much honesty that it makes them uncomfortable. And then they're not as excited about the relationship anymore. Like a lot of things, the friend that tells you the most truth that you don't want to hear is who you want to keep in your circle. Not to tell some person who tells you that you look amazing when you go out, people start laughing at you, right? So I think that's been my philosophy, but I have tremendous coaches, people that I trust that they will tell me my areas of opportunity more than they'll tell me what I'm good at. And I value those relationships more. And also sometimes the best mentors you could have are people that you've never met. We live in a world where in terms of books, biographies, YouTube, I have so many people I consider mentors that I have never met, right? Because I consume what they say. I learn from them. I mentioned Vusi Tembekwayo earlier. He's one of the content, like I consume it. So sometimes mentorship is not tangible. You could learn a lot of things just from reading about people who have also overcome a lot of challenges or done some great things in life that you're inspired by. It doesn't have to be somebody, because honestly, most of the times the person you want that mentorship, they're actually too busy to admit the fact that they could give you quality time, especially if they have wives, they have children, they have parents that actually need attention span. It creates a dynamic in the relationship sometimes that's not sustainable.
Well, also, we need to be clear that both the mentor and the mentee need to be clear about what they get involved in. You need to understand what mentorship is. And like Ismail said, mentor and coach are two different things. When the mentor acts like a coach, it becomes a bit of a problem. That when you're mentoring, there's something specific you're trying to gain from that particular person. So I'm like, I give a great example of footballer. I know Rashford at some point, for those who watch football, at Manchester United was struggling with goal scoring, and they got somebody who was really good at goal scoring, Benny McCarthy, to come and work on that particular aspect of his game. So and that you want to copy as much as possible. You want to do what he did to work on that particular skills, not to embody everything else he's trying to do. So as a mentor, we're mentoring, be clear, what skills am I trying to help you? What is it I have done very well that I'm an expert in that you want to learn? And I can show you how I did it. But when you try to take that mentor relationship into a coaching zone, it's a bit of a problem, because it's taking what you've done and embody everything else, which is what I believe you're trying to avoid, Miracle. So we should be clear about what those relationships are and what we're trying to pick up.
Okay, so Oyindamola is going to ask a question now. He has a question. Oyindamola, please, can you ask a question? Oyindamola, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, all right. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ismail and Mr. George, for this insightful teachings and all. So my question is to Mr. George. You mentioned something earlier about decolonizing the educational structure. So I was the one that asked the question, and I'm currently an undergraduate student of the University of Lagos, studying history and strategic studies. So my question now is, you already answered a question on decolonizing the educational structure. So now you mentioned something about we going to the past, that is the pre-colonial times, to learn one or two things from them. So my question now is, don't you think technology can be an issue in such a way that things over there or things then are different from the way things are now?
Well, all things are definitely different. They're worse. That much I'll tell you. But when I say go back, it's about values. It's about how we live and function very successfully as a society before the governance structures and bureaucracy and capitalism came to Africa. Because I mean, let me grab this. What they've given us, I just got this book, was born of greed. Ismail said it, they came to loot. They didn't come to help us per se. I mean, there are people who did, some of the early missionaries, stuff, but they just came to loot Africa. So what they gave us was to enable them to do what they wanted to do. Right? So it's about the system, it's about the values, it's about how things. I mean, you say you're studying history and what?
Strategic studies.
Strategic studies. Okay. I talked earlier on about the justice system. Their justice system is different from what we had. What we had was about restorative justice, not punitive justice. So we should study that. We can look at how do we restore balance to society instead of punishing people. How did we market? It were those relationships that built the market in those days, not necessarily the what they're giving us now. I mean, stuff like that, values and about how we relate with one another, and that should be infused with what we have today. So things have changed. The structure of society has changed. The way we communicate has changed. There's YouTube, there's media. Another good example, right? Instead of us putting up some of the spending money and showing off how much money you're making and driving greed, how about sharing some of the stories that we used to tell growing up? about how we lived. We have Nollywood now. Why is Nollywood telling our story? It was
Mhm.
Hollywood that did the Woman King. Why aren't we telling that story?
Mhm.
But it's now
Mhm.
even mothers are buying cars and stuff. It's
Mhm.
it's not just the clothes in our curriculum. It's also our mindsets. So we know who we are, that we're in touch with who we are, and where we're coming from,
Mhm.
and determine what we want to go with that.
Mhm.
Does that make any sense? You're smiling, so I'm sure I hope the answer was good.
Yeah, yeah, good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Miracle in two places. Okay. That was a miracle on its own.
Okay, good. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, we could hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, so the next question is, I think this is something that I believe a lot of young people are actually experiencing right now, and that's because we're actually having a lot of issues, especially in West Africa. And the problem is this: how how do we balance? So we're told to be impactful, we're told to be empower other people. How do we like balance it? When are we meant to actually start empowering other people? And at the same time, when do we know when to develop ourselves to the point where we come to realization that we're meant to be also empower other people? So for me, growing up, I'd always felt like I wanted to be empower other people. And somehow I realized that I was always going, I don't want to use the word broke, but sometimes I got broke in the process of trying to actually empower people. So the question is, how do we balance it as young people, such a way that, fine, we do not want to feel like we're greedy, at the same time we want to empower other people. So how do we balance it? When do we know when we're to empower other people, and when do we know when we're meant to develop ourselves to the point where we know this is the right time to start empowering other people?
You start empowering people when you have what to empower them with or by. That's where it starts from. Um, I never thought I'd be in the leadership space. I never wanted. I'm a very laid back person. I was okay living in my own little bubble. Then my second semester, third year, civil engineering first degree, I had 6 Fs and a D. Flunked the whole semester. My life spiraled out of control. And then in trying to, again, that whole community thing. So I shared it with like, the community. Other people going through the same thing will keep it to themselves. I shared it with the community. This is what I was going through. And in finding answers, to find the strength to come back from that failure, in finding purpose in my life, when I found those answers, I started sharing those answers. So every step of that journey, when I have learned something, I share that. So it's not oh, it's now the right time, or I have the means. It's what you have when you've accomplished. I mean, the first step when coaching practice or trying to work with leaders is self-leadership. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything else. So the way you lead
Mhm.
yourself is the way you lead
Mhm.
other. The way you find your
Mhm.
motivation, the way you lead other people. So when you have learned anything, you've mastered anything, then you can share. If you've made money, let's say you've made a couple of millions, you can share that. If you've overcome any difficulty, what we call leadership wisdom, if there's anything difficult you've overcome and you have mastered, then you share. So there's no benchmark per se. It's as soon as you have learned or mastered anything, that's what you empower other people with.
Yeah. No, that's so well put, Doc. It resonates because oftentimes, once again, I see things chapters in life where you have to be in an incubation period as a human being before you could germinate or even try to do anything else. And even if you look at ages, most people in your 20s, I consider you in a lab. You should be trying to find a skill set, knowledge base, wisdom, your 10,000 hours in something where you could start even thinking about impacting. And I see it as circle of influence. You could start impacting at a very small scale when you're not ready. Those are your little cousins, your family members that you're giving them wisdom that it's not monetary in value. Anybody who has an expectation of something that is tied to monetary reasons when you're not financially stable, you're not helping yourself. Even if you feel good for a small moment, you're actually doing more harm, and you're probably building habits down the line that when you do have an abundance of resources, you won't be able to allocate it in a fiscal way. And you run into this cycle of, instead of helping people, you're actually enabling also their bad behaviors. So if they can be forgiving to the fact that you are in a lab and you are incubating yourself to be ready to serve based on wisdom and knowledge and doing hard things, which oftentimes, very rare do you see somebody in your 20s or early 30s who is ready to be the philanthropist, the coach, the mentor. Social media may paint that, but even the average age of a millionaire, the average CEO age, happens in their 50s, their late 40s. So I think it also comes back to just focus on building you first, where with wisdom, with knowledge. And then when you know that you've arrived, and I'm glad Dr. Akomas mentioned it, it's something you feel that, okay, this is something so hard for somebody who doesn't have the experience, but for me, I could do it with my eyes closed. You've achieved mastery in something that now you have a responsibility to teach or to improve something else using that mastery, right? But don't rush that incubation process as well too. And I'm glad he mentioned that oftentimes, if you cannot lead yourself, you would never be able to lead another human being. So if you're not honest with yourself, you wouldn't be able to be honest with somebody else. If you cheat the process in building yourself, you'll cheat the process of building somebody else, right? So you just become a reflection of what it is, but don't rush the process. Incubation, and this is, Doctor has a PhD. I was also in school till I was 28 years old. At 28, some of my colleagues had a 4 or 5 year career already. If you were an engineer, that bachelor degree was giving you so much stability, right? And I was still in school, right? So I did not start my career until I was 28 years old, right? But the amount of mastery and knowledge that happens, most people in this day and age, if you tell them, do 12 years of school and then go and add more, they'll think you're insane, right? And the funny thing is, like, I probably use maybe 20% of what I learned till 28 doing what I'm doing now, because God also has a plan for you that has nothing to do with that civil engineering course that Dr. Alcomas was doing, right?
I never practiced.
So it's just patience, grace, and be kind to yourself. Oftentimes, you want to offer grace to everybody but the person in the mirror. And only a cup that is full could flow into the streams of other people. An empty cup can't fill anybody else's cup. So be okay filling your cup first.
And I like what it's about. See life in chapters. So I would say, if you're going to share your story, finish one chapter first. Don't tell a story halfway. So finish a chapter and then you can share that story. Don't tell a story halfway.
Yeah.
Just wanted to add that.
And turn it off. Most people on social media are lying anyways. A lot of things on social media is not real. I tell people social media is not real. That picture was after 5 takes in the best lighting with the best makeup day. That suit was the day it came back from the dry cleaners, or everything is polished and packaged to make you think that is the norm, when social media is an outlier platform. You find the outlier, not the standard, the outlier, and you showcase it as well too. So you always have to take everything with a with a dose of salt.
Okay.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, sir. So this question is something that I've been wanting to ask, but because this is not a religious denomination program, this is more like, I won't put it like more like a philosophical program. So we in Africa, we're very religious. We're very, very religious, and we always attach things to religion. And I think we can't take that from ourselves, because I also studied religion in school. And so, but what I've discovered over the years is how we have some of our leaders, political leaders, are able to actually do something wrong and attach it to the fact that God is able to do this. And so the question is this: how do we balance religion? And how do we separate it? Can it be separated, religion, and then what word can I find for it? I don't want to use the word reality, but so for example, virtues like values, should they be associated, should they be joined together with religion? And how do we separate them? So let's say, for example, a leader becomes a leader who has been in different kind of issues, drug and all that, and he still has cases that he has not resolved. And he becomes the president because he finds a way to maneuver things and then pay bribe and all that. And then he becomes a president. And a religious leader comes to say that, God has chosen him. God has chosen him to be the leader. Which just let's forget things. Let's forget what he has done. Let's forget what he's doing. Let's just focus on this. Now, I always feel that that is actually very wrong. But people that are saying these things are like older religious leaders. How do we balance it? How do we make young people know that, okay, what to be spiritual, to be religious doesn't mean that you are not using your mind, doesn't mean that you're not being rational. How do we do it? So that young people don't go and do something wrong, and then they later come to say that, oh, God over.
This I could go on all day on this. I'm really trying.
That's another 4-hour conversation when it comes.
I promise you, I'm really trying to restrain myself to pick a few things. Okay, well, it's just me and you here. You want to go first?
Oh man,
you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I tend not to speak too much about religion because by nature I'm very pragmatic and I'm very logical. Things have to make sense. And all I would say, that's the one aspect of most African lives where even if you hold a PhD, logic has to be off in some aspects. And I like using spirituality more because I think spirituality has lasted longer in Africa than religion. Religion, I see it as a language, like they just taught us English to use to communicate. Religion should be designed to give you a foundation of good morals, understand that you are not in control. There's something bigger than you. Can you overdo it? Yes. Africa, and we have an uncomfortable relationship with religion because most people who are telling it or teaching us or giving it to us, they live prosperous lives that we are yet to see manifest on the continent. And I'm just gonna say, and I've written and spoken about this, so I just like to keep it in the confines of spirituality and using religion as a tool and not as an impediment to your growth and development as a human being.
That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
that's what's supposed to be. I mean, when I was talking earlier, I mentioned it earlier on that greed is such a powerful. Greed is like a virus.
Yeah.
But we talk about spirituality, right? You're talking about things that are non-materialistic. Talking about purpose, talking about virtue, talking about self-development, talking about your connection to the divine and other people. But when your spirituality is now used to promote materialism, there's a problem. It still comes back to that thing about greed. The virus has mutated now. And it's again greed that somebody is telling you that it's about more. Use religion as a tool for more. Your question is about more. It's fitting to our personal greed. I don't have a problem with religious leaders who are doing what they're doing. They are being fooled by their own greed. I have a problem with the people who are buying into that because of our own greed. It's like a con. What you're raising for most times you're conned because of greed. Where they're told, bring 1 penny and I'll give you 1 million. Really? And you fall for it. Or give me this and I'll give you that. So you want more without putting in the work. And that's the same thing that they're using religion to do to us. So it's our greed that's putting us in that position. I don't blame that. Let them do what they need to do. But if you're not sensible enough to understand that religion is supposed to give you a structure in terms of spirituality to guide you, two different things. Ideally, so religion, whether you're Muslim or you're Christian, whatever it is, to give some kind of structure, the rituals, the practices, to guide you to find that your path to spirituality, to connect with each other, to connect with the divine. If you don't understand that, and instead you are using it to chase more because they have shown you a fast life, printing El Dorado for you, then it's on you.
I couldn't agree more. It's a tool. And every Black man in the world has to understand our history and relationship, not with spirituality, but with religion, because too many times in the history of our people, we've been on the short end of the stick when it comes to not spirituality, but religion, for better, for worse. So I just typically say that as well too. That's why I consider myself more spiritual than I am religious. But also I'm a logical human being as well too. So fundamentally, every child, even before religion, was taught right from wrong.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. But anything that mankind could use to manipulate human behavior would be used as a tool. So religion, education, militarism, politics, put that all in one bucket of tools that mankind have used to even convince us Black people at some point in our history that God was okay with us being slaves or us being we have a very complicated relationship.
We need to learn from that. It's just really weird that the most wicked, deceitful, criminal people I know are the most religious.
Yeah.
But the most spiritual people I know are some of the kindest people. Someone's there's a comfort space as he or she has a question.
Sure.
You can ask before the moderators come back. I'm seeing the question in the chat.
Okay, Miracle is back. Miracle, hopefully we answered your question. I think religion, that's another 5-hour conversation. Don't open Pandora's box. Because before they post tomorrow on a headline, Dr. Ismail and Dr. Okomas are atheists. They don't believe in God.
We're still just praying, die.
Well, so sorry about that. So I think since I wasn't here, but thank God you were able to actually clarify that. Okay, okay, there's a question here. The question is saying, okay, let me paste it so we see it. So this is a question. My question is this: should we be afraid that the next generation, the unborn children, will be swayed into greed? How can we help them differentiate the truth from the norm?
Oh, you should be afraid. Very much afraid. Social media, TV, movies, you should be very afraid. But raise them well. My mom taught me something my mom taught us, like, if it's not yours, don't touch it. Always ask for it, take something. When you want someone else's thing, ask you, why do you want someone else's thing? You don't go to school and come back with something that's not yours. My mother knew everything you owned, every pen you went to school with, she knew. Some parents are okay with their children going to steal and bring back big cars and they celebrate them. Raise your children well. I had a competition on Mother's Day. If I want to do it every Mother's Day now, I called it Leadership Lessons I Learned from My Mother.
Mm-hmm.
And this year I shared how my mother taught me leaders eat last before the book was written. That when we're eating, she brings me and my siblings together. I'm the oldest, and I have to leave first. And my sister now leaves for the youngest. That's how I learned that leaders eat last. My mother taught me that. So it depends on how you raise the culture at home. This culture is the most powerful tool for or against. The problem we have with greed today, because we have a culture of greed. But if you create a safe space for your children where they learn contentment, where they learn gratitude, where they learn to give, you're good.
Yeah, I agree. I believe more in nurturing that child. And I have a 5-year-old daughter who scares me because I'm raising her in America. And we know all the stuff that America will tell her that it's okay. But one thing she understands at 5 years old is, even if the world says this is okay, in the Baji household, our code, our moral foundation is this. And the sooner you start raising your kids from a place of identity and them understanding that what's for everybody is not for me, you empower them with information that will protect them as they navigate a world that so many people are going to tell them it's okay to be this. But now she would literally tell you, no, I'm African, we do X, Y, and Z. So we just have a responsibility to protect it, but it takes active parenting. It doesn't come with an instruction manual. You'll make mistakes. They will make mistakes. But you just have to be a good steward of their mind, and you mold it as well too. I think manipulation is it's never bad when you're doing it to your child to have a better chance of success. So yeah, it's just also being vigilant. I think that's just not being present in a child's life allows you to understand how they are receiving the world. And kids are more curious than adults. If you create an environment where it's okay for them to ask, you have an opportunity to answer. Because once again, going back to the whole cup mechanism, it's either you filled your child's cup or somebody else will pour something that doesn't belong into your child's cup. But a cup that is full, no matter how much you want to pour into it, it will just overflow because the child enters the world with their cup full. So fill your children's cup with contents that you want. That way, nobody has room to fill something else that does not belong into your child's cup. That's the best way to describe it.
Nicely put.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so Mr. Ken, actually today's Mr. Ken's wife's birthday. He came earlier, he joined earlier on, but he said he had a meeting. And so he wanted to speak before he went, but I told him he was going to speak around at 11:30, and I think he's still in the meeting, and that's why he has not been able to join. So I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're coming to the end of the section now. So the question I just want to ask, two questions to Mr. George and then Mr. Ismail is, honestly, the topic, before I chose this theme, I was looking for, okay, who can I reach out to? Because I didn't want to invite any speaker that would, just speak English and then go. And I feel like it's a very serious case in our nation and in our continent, Africa, that somehow it's like someone said something that you can't separate greed and African leaders. They are somehow like the same, and that's like a bad stereotype that we can actually do bad. So there are three questions. The first question is this: those who are listening right now and those who would listen later on, probably they found themselves being greedy over certain things, and they thought that maybe they were imitating a leader in a way, and now they realize that it's wrong. How can they come back on track? And is there a hope that they could actually come back and still be like exceptional leaders?
One thing I'm going to mention again is, hey, we don't own greed. Let's not brand greed as African, right? We keep falling into these traps sometimes. We take ownership of things that we don't own greed. Greed, it has been around throughout human beings' history entirety. Even evolution-wise, our bodies are programmed for greed. That's why you keep eating more and it turns it into fat because it thinks a famine is coming and it wants to give you the best chance of survival when there's scarcity of food. Greed is not an African concept. Africa has been a victim of greed more than it has a propagator of greed. So I think it's very important for us to understand that we don't own greed. Greed is the symptom, a byproduct of scarcity, a byproduct of poverty, a byproduct of a small percentage of people always having access to a wealth of resources, right? So I'm just going to keep mentioning that because we can't take ownership of this word. I think even the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, all the Buddhism, it's a form of suffering. So every spiritual doctrine has mentioned that human being has a tendency or a predisposition for greed, and they're teaching you to have certain values that prevents you from being greedy, which is why Doctor was mentioning how societies used to shame it as it was anti, a humanistic value, especially in a sense of community where you should be sharing, right? So we have just suffered from it more visibly, but there's more greed in the UK, there's more greed in America, there's more greed in Asia than there is in Africa. The manifestation is just so visceral, but also the media has a good way of always portraying corrupt African leader stifled by greed, when greed is a facet of every society as well too. So we also have to be very careful with how we talk about the idea as well too. I just want to emphasize that.
Yeah, to add to that, if the person realizes they're greedy, I think that's the problem half solved. But then it's a funny one. We talked about selfishness, which is a human trait. like Ismail said, that it's in all of us. It's that shadow, that dark side of us. The minute you go from being selfish to be more altruistic in nature, or you begin to recognize your role or your position or to contribute to society, that's the answer to the problem right there. Is that realization, because it's difficult enough realizing, hey, I'm being greedy. That's the problem right there. Is that realization of greed. How many leaders do you think you ask if they're greedy and they'll say they are? How many of the so-called African leaders? They'll find a justification for what they're doing. They'll tell you, oh, it's my turn. Not reference to anyone. They will tell you that, oh, the person before me did it. They won't tell you they're greedy. They don't see themselves as greedy. So that realization right there, that, oh, I'm being greedy, means I'm being selfish in my ambition. I'm being selfish in my creation of resources. That is already the solution to the problem. And then you begin to look at how to help. But let me just throw something in there. There's something called the trustworthiness equation. Not trust equation, because trust is twofold. Trust, you are trustworthy, and another person tries to trust you. Look at your trustworthiness. The equation there is your credibility. In other words, do you have the capacity to do what you say you would do? Reliability. Can you be dependent on to do what you say you will do? Plus your intimacy. How open are you? How accessible are you? So let's say we put 20 for each one. That's 60, right? Divided by your self-orientation. How selfish are you? So if you are someone who focuses more on other people, you do more for other people, give yourself a score of 1, then you have a score of 60 for your trustworthiness equation. But if everything you're doing is for yourself, give a score of 20, you find that your trustworthiness drops down to 6. So again, that realization that, oh, it's not about me, it's about us. That is the problem solved right there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And most religious philosophies will tell you greed is a form of human suffering anyways. So a human being who's unable to get a sense of contentment, I have enough of something. There's something broken, inherently broken in them as well too. So it's not something you want to ascribe for anyways, because somebody who's spiritually aligned has gratitude and contentment more than they do have a propensity to always want to fill a void. So oftentimes greed could be an impediment as well.
Everything double, greed. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this section, and then we'd like to give opportunity for those who are watching. If you have a question, you could drop it before we come to an end of this. But before we come to an end, we want to ask a last, more like, yes, to both of our speakers is, you've been through a lot, you've had experience, you've gone through a lot, and Mr. Ismail just wrote a book, and then not just wrote a book, he has a book, and I think we can see it from behind him. Behind the cupboard there, hyenas. I don't know. Am I pronouncing it well, sir?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, and would like you to give us a few advice. In your experience so far, being a leader, being a doctor in your field, what advice would you give to young people? And over 200 people, actually, over 300 people registered for this conference, and I never forced anybody to register. So I think it's a topic that a lot of people find that it resonates with them. So it's something that they want to know. So what advice did you give to young people, even outside of the team, and what you discovered so far in your journey, and even in your book as well too?
No, I think this conversation has been an embodiment of a lot of things that I addressed in the book. One, in terms of, I think, if I had to put it in buckets, as early as you can as a young person, start identifying what your core values are as a human being. That becomes the code that you live with. It becomes how you select a mate. It becomes how you raise your kids. What do I fundamentally believe in? Especially if you could document that these are the codes that I live by, right? And oftentimes how you know it's yours, it's not difficult for you to do it, right? That's your core values. Number 2 is, I believe every human being, once you are adult, you have to start a re-education program that is dictated by you. Seeking knowledge intentionally that may be counterculture. It may be counter what your school system gave you, because we live in a day and age where ignorance is no longer an excuse. There's so much access to information to educate yourself on any subject matter that if you waste your incubation period, and I always say 18 to like 25, 26, before you're 30, that is your responsibility to find what God has put you on this earth to do. And it has to be through discipline. It has to be through actively seeking knowledge. And it has to be with being okay with changing your mind when presented with new information that makes sense to you. A lot of people, their biggest impediment to growth is they lack the ability to change their mind or behavior based on new information that is presented to them, right? And the rest is, and I keep saying this, young people turn it off. And as Doctor says, slow it down, right? No, life is a marathon. And there's so many chapters to life that I am still in the lab. So even if you think somebody is a finished product, once again, whose metric of success are you going by, right? Because I don't know what I'm going to be at 50 years old, even if I'm going to be at 50 years old, right? So everything that I'm doing, there's a responsibility I have to know that, okay, I have accumulated enough hours doing this one thing where I feel like I wouldn't step out to the world and be an emperor with no clothes on, which can happen, right? But also just realizing what's at stake and that responsibility that you have, honestly. But don't rush the process. Trust the process. Trust you. Find out what your values are, and never ever compare somebody else's chapter 20 to your chapter 2, because you'll be crying, you'll be depressed, but God maybe had it for your chapter 5, and you're over here being ungrateful or impatient about what God has in store for you. So just trust the process. That I just keep telling young people that you're not late, you're right on time. And any obstacle, any challenge that God puts you through, he's already put you in a position to push through it, right? So that has nothing to do with spirituality, but oftentimes God puts us on the loneliest paths to bring us closer to that higher power. And you feel it in that moment, right? So that's why I don't celebrate success. I don't believe in success metrics. I don't believe in the American dream, the immigrant dream, all that stuff. I just believe in every single day, am I maximizing everything that God has put me or gifted me with? And as long as I'm doing that, I'm okay with me. And more young people just need to believe that, because I believe every single person was put on this earth for a particular reason, but also for a particular season. So just don't waste your season. That's it.
Hard to follow
Okay,
that.
Mr. John.
I mean, 100%. That's exactly the same thing I was going to. Well, the same thing I was going to say, and for it to be the same thing I was going to say shows how universal those truths are. I was going to say a bit differently, though. I was going to put it this way. First of all, document where you're coming from. You have to know identity, know who you are, clearly know who you are. Secondly, know exactly where you're going to. Have a very clear sense of vision. In fact, I will ask everybody after this to go write the obituary notice or their you know, when you die, that whole oration they give you. I want you to write what you want people to say at your funeral. I want you to talk about who you impacted, how you impacted them, what is it you did. I want that clearly written. On my desktop, I have my obituary notice with a question mark on it. And it's a reminder to myself, because we talk about the teach us to number our days. But if you're numbering your days, that means you have a beginning, have an end. Otherwise, it's infinite. I'm not numbering that. So to each day I sit on my desk to ask myself, like he said, if today's my last day, let me do my best work. If today's my last day, let me make me one person smile. If today's my last day, let me touch one life. So when they talk about him, oh, he died yesterday, but he said this to me yesterday. So I don't waste it. So the same thing he said, but so know where you're coming from. Know your values that guide you towards your vision. They are your GPS map towards your vision. So know exactly where you're headed to. And in terms of when we talked about trust the process, I also want to add enjoy the process. you're not a victim of circumstance. We find ourselves in situations that are not our own doing, and we can moan. I remember when I was my PhD, I was homeless for a year. I slept under my desk in the PhD office, and I took a shower in the gym every morning. People were like, "Oh, you're suffering," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." I was the healthiest I was in my life. I was going to the gym. I was picking my meals carefully. I was still sharing those meals. It was almost like an adventure because I knew why I was there. I knew what I was trying to achieve. I did my PhD in record time, in 2 years and 6 months. Because I had no distractions, I had nothing else to do but to sit down at that desk and work. So enjoy the process. I've been through we've been through challenging times. So each time something comes like, okay, why am I going through this? There is a reason for this. There's something I'm supposed to learn from this. Either to build resilience, either to pick a new skill set. I need to pick it up so I don't repeat this class. Pick it and move. But there's a reason you're here. So trust the process, but also enjoy that process. And I think be true to yourself. Like, once you know who you are, be true. You have to be like anybody else. Live your best life every day. You have only one life. There's no sequel to this. It's not a video game. You don't get any extra life for being good. It's done. It's done. It's a wrap. So live, man.
Wow. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, so we've come to the end of this conference, and some people are reaching out to me, saying that, okay, how do they reach out to you? And like, so probably if you want to probably give out your handles, your social media handles, and so that people would want to reach out to you. So,
I want his book, by the way. How do I get an autographed copy of your book? Do you have a website so I can purchase and you sign? You're on mute, sorry. Why is everybody on mute?
You're on mute. Okay.
Sorry, Doc. It's on Amazon. It's called Life as a Hyphen as well, too. Publishing in Africa has started. I think we'll have distribution in Nigeria before the end of the year as well, too. But yes, Life as a Hyphen on Amazon.
I want an autographed copy. How do I get that?
Send me your address. I'll get you one.
All right. How do I pay for it?
Let's see. Let me give you a link. If you go to lifeasahyphen.com, Doc,
all right,
you could pay for it through there, and I'll get you a signed copy. So just lifeasahyphen.com. Life as a hyphen.
Let me put that here too.
.com, yeah. And I know, Miracle, if you could just share Doc's contact information as well too with me. But yeah, lifeasahyphen.com, you could get it there. And I think it covers so many topics, because going back to your obituary, this book, I wrote it to my daughter as if I would never have an opportunity to tell her about certain things that I would want her to know from me. So it covers everything: religion, spirituality, masculinity, you name it, love, all of that. And I'm glad Doc mentioned mortality, because we talk about mortality as if it's not guaranteed, and we're all dying the day we're born. So yeah, I'm a big fan of being prepared every day.
The day I posted this on the blog post, right? The amount of insults I got that day.
Yeah.
I understood it. They weren't mad at me for that.
Yeah.
I just reminded them of their mortality and something they want to think about. But I had to go this way. I lost my mom, and she was about to enter the prime of her life, and she just and when you somebody close to you, that's when you appreciate that nothing in life is guaranteed. Nothing. You don't carry extra luggage anymore. You don't beef. It's not worth it. Nothing. Every day, once you lose someone you love the most, you lose a child, a parent. It becomes clear that life is for the living.
Yeah.
All right. Mercury, you have my handles. I'm not even sure what they are. I think it's George Akomas.
Let me try to put that. Let me try to paste that here, Mr. Also, I'm just going to paste Mr. Let me try and paste that. So we're going to let our co-moderator to give a closing remark. But before that, I want to acknowledge someone. I would like to acknowledge someone. His name is Williams Ambrose, and he's a co-founder of Depth to Life. Shockingly, I was just watching his podcast recently, and I realized that he was empowering people. He's in the US. And he was in depth of, I think, over 135 $1,000. And in those times, he just recently paid it, and it took him 2.5 years to pay the debt. And so he started a podcast on that, and paying like from debt to life. And during those moments, he was still empowering people, and I was wondering how he was doing it, and then how he was still able to actually give scholarship to people in Africa, and how he was still able to actually empower people too. I would like him to come on, but he doesn't like he doesn't like being on the front. Fraud still. Probably he's just going to say hi. I wanted to give a closing remark, but he said he doesn't want to come on and all that. So but I want to say thank you for the fact that he supported some of our conference, and so for those who would like to be part of it. So we're going to let Miss Oyin Damola give a closing remark, and I'm going to while she's doing that, I'm going to put the handles.
All right, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Dr. George Akomos and Mr. Ismail, for today's insightful teachings. Thank you, and thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this West Africa Youth Leadership Conference. We really appreciate you, and thank you all for your patience. The network issues and all. Thank you all for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Miracle, well done. Thank you so much. Doc, I'm sure we'll stay connected as well to look forward to engaging.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely every year. I don't know why. It's always good. Yeah, every year we have this conference. Our speakers are always becoming friends. And the last 2 years they became friends. Last year they became friends, and then this year again we have another.
there you go. Definitely, this was great. It was worth the early morning. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Yes, in the US. What time is it there?
Well, it's 7 now, but we started around early enough. But I'm an early bird anyway, so all is well.
Well, thank you so much. I want to say personally, I want to say thank you from my side. I want to say thanks to Mr. Ismail and Mr. George, and it's a great privilege to have men like you. Honestly, I wanted to change the topic because I didn't know. Okay, I was thinking, okay, Miracle. I just don't want to just post this and then just give it a name just because it sounded interesting. But I was looking for people that I know we're not all perfect, but the first meeting we had with Mr. Ismail and he spoke, and I knew that, okay, it was very important that we have him to speak. Very, very important, and I'm really grateful. Thank you so much, Mr. Ismail. I'm really grateful.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have Mr. George's details right now. Mrs. Ismail, is it possible for you to put the details? I could just pinpoint it so that for those who have commented, so that I would just highlight it on the screen. So for those who are going to see, those who might want to reach out to you on your Instagram or LinkedIn, name.
I'm on the page now.
Okay.
That's interesting.
And thank you so much for all our viewers. For those who are going to be getting a mail to watch the section again, we're very, very sorry. Really, really sorry about this. We're probably not going to use this platform the next time we're going to be doing this anymore. And I want to say thank you to my Mr. Williams, who was also at the background trying to help out again. He doesn't like to be on the front side, so he wants to be at the backstage. I really would have wished that he would want to give some few words, but I don't know. He doesn't want to do it. Okay, so sir, Mrs. Smart, have you so that I could show that on the screen?
Yeah. All right, there you go.
Okay.
That's on Instagram and Twitter.
Okay. Okay, I think some people are just joining again. I'm like, well, the conference comes to an end already, so maybe we could just watch it all over again.
All right. Thank you. I need to bounce, so thank you for having us. And then
okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. George. Thank you so much, Mr. George.
Really
and Miracle, I've shared my handles on the chat if you want to retrieve it.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I can't find it yet.
It's on the. Let me put it in the comments.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
Not yet.
It's on the comments.
One line of seeing it. Let me see. Probably. Let me see. Okay. Okay. She is something. Okay. I still haven't seen it. But I will just do that. I will just let you go so that we don't keep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we're very grateful. We hope that. Okay. Wow. So for those who are just coming, you can always watch this again. You can always watch this. You can go to our various Instagram handles and then watch again. And I want to say thank you guys for really being part of this. It's a great privilege to have you guys. And you can follow us on our various social media accounts and get ready for next year. Same time next year, we're going to be announcing details as time goes on. Mr. Coppin, you can always watch the rest of the videos too. You can just check our YouTube channel. Okay, guys, thank you so much once again, and I hope to see you guys. And we're so sorry about the old glitches in the network. We hope that we see you guys another time. Bye.